Not all villains are created equal. Some villains are extremely entertaining. Some villains are motivated by a sense of corrupt conviction. Some villains are so likable that by the end they end up having a redemption arc. Probably wondering why. Well, because we as the audience love them so much, we will defend them to our dying breath. While other villains exist, there are some villains that are so weakly written that you wonder why they're even there in the first place. And as you wonder why they're even there, you begin to wonder why the story even exists. If the villain isn't worth fighting against, why do we even have a story? Everything about the story falls apart at the seams. A villain in a story revolving around a hero makes or breaks the immersive experience for the audience. The plot theoretically could be solid, but if the villain is weakly written, you can forget about creating a successful story. So it got me thinking, what makes an effective villain? First, we need to define what a villain is. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, a villain is a bad person who harms other people or breaks the law, a criminal, a character in a book, play, movie, etc., who harms other people, something, or someone considered harmful or dangerous. Simply put, a villain is a person that hurts other people. Before we go further, I believe we need to discuss the differences between a villain and an antagonist. Although a villain can be an antagonist doesn't always need to be a villain. Citing the same website, the definition of an antagonist is a person who is strongly opposed to something or someone. An antagonist opposes the hero in something big or small, making the hero's life more challenging. But the villain is there to bring harm to others, to be a danger to people. This causes a direct conflict with the hero whose usual goal is to keep the peace. This is a surface level observation on my part on the differences between an antagonist and a villain. There have been many deep dives into the differences between the two as well as literary definitions for the words, but for the sake of this video, this basic definition is what I'm running with, so we all have a basic understanding and a launching off point for my thesis. Now that we have a definition of a villain as well as an understanding of the differences between an antagonist and a villain, we can finally explore what makes an effective villain. Remember when I said not all villains are created equal? Well, different villains have different levels of social acceptability, ranging from incredibly loved to universally hated. Let's start with the lowest tier of villainy. These villains have committed crimes. These villains have definitely harmed, if not outright killed people. They are not in the right morally in a lot of ways. But they aren't completely evil. They tend to have redeeming qualities that make them likable. They are often charming and have the added benefit of being incredibly good looking. May I present to you Exhibit A. Regina kidnapped a town's worth of fairy tale characters, erased their memory, and held them hostage in a small town for years. Not only that, but she has harmed, maimed, and killed people to achieve her agendas. She has manipulated people, lied, stole, betrayed, and cursed others with her magic. On paper and in the show, her actions are horrific, but she isn't that bad. Yeah, she did everything I listed, but she also genuinely loves her son Henry and is willing to do anything to protect and care for him. She gets redeemed throughout the show and has moments of genuine heroism. We also get her backstory and find out that her actions are motivated for revenge, not a good motivation, but understandable. And morally superior characters weren't as squeaky clean as we thought. It also helps that Regina is incredibly gorgeous. Her beauty isn't everything, but I would be lying to say that her beauty isn't playing a bit of a role. She is a villain that is easy to root for, and with one quick YouTube search, you can see how many people simp for this character, with or without good reason. But wait, I have one more example to give you. Loki has threatened, harmed, and killed Lord knows how many people. Started a war with the Avengers that destroyed a city and attempted to subjugate a group of people. But he's a fun watch and super likable. We get more of his backstory and find out he was cast aside by his own people, looked at as a monster by his adoptive father, and was denied basic love and affection that may or may not have contributed to his psychopathic tendencies. Loki also goes through a redemption arc where he connects with his brother, learns to trust others, and becomes more heroic. And it just so happens that he's played by a rather beautiful man. So he also has that working for him. With these two examples, what can we conclude about villains that are largely loved? It seems that these villains operate from a deep-seated internal wound, the hurt people mindset. Although their actions are horrendous, we can understand why they do what they do. So we have the ability to empathize with them despite what they're doing. They also show their redeeming qualities long before they receive the redemption arcs, which sets up the desire within the audience to see that arc come to fruition. They are charming, witty, and usually, but not always, very attractive. More than all that, they are very human. They aren't fully leaned into their villainy and retained a good amount of humanity despite all the blood on their hands, which the show or movie loves to ignore. They are the villains we love because even if they are a bad guy, we don't really want them to be the bad guy. So that is what makes the villains we love so effective, but they aren't the only type of villain that exists. Next on the list of villains directly after the ones we like are we love them, we hate that we love them, and we hate them all at the same time. What kind of villains are these? These villains are villains. They murder the innocent, control those around them with fear, flex their power on everyone around them, but they operate within the form of a code or ideological drive. They don't kill for the sake of killing necessarily. Murder is a means to an end, and even if they do enjoy taking lives or harming others, there is usually a purpose behind it. An excellent villain that held real weight as a true threat to the Avengers because 1, he was extremely powerful, 2, he was vicious in his pursuit of his goals, and 3, he operated with ideological conviction. I am by no means saying Thanos' vision for the universe was correct, although some may argue with me. That is not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that Thanos was a real threat to not just the Avengers, but the universe as a whole. He would stop at nothing to achieve his goals and was willing to sacrifice everything to get there. He has the ability to control others through fear or awe, was willing to stand toe-to-toe with his foes, and had a clear objective from beginning to end. We love his character because he is a threat to our heroes. We also hate him because he is such a valid threat. Thanos is the type of character that brings weight to the stakes that are set in the story. Thanos is the character that makes you question whether or not the heroes can win. Why? Because they lost to him before. Because of this, it makes watching Thanos entertaining for the audience, so we love him, but we also hate him. He isn't the only one that has this status. There's also starts off slaughtering his teammates in the most gruesome way possible while living this double life as a hero, creating this family and maintaining this perfect identity until he drops it and reveals his plan to take over the world, which has been his purpose from the start. He levels cities, destroyed a whole planet, called his wife a pet, and beat his son near death. Omni-Man is a clear and present threat. He has been shown to kill those closest to him without a second thought, harms his flesh and blood because his son wouldn't follow in his footsteps, and views every being besides himself and his son as insects worthy of slaughter. However, Omni-Man doesn't do this just cuz. He operates with a specific goal in mind. Granted, is to take over the world, but is to take over the world to remove all weakness and become a stronger society. And even as he beats his son, he pulls back because he couldn't completely bear the thought of killing his own flesh and blood. Omni-Man is a real threat in the show who can create real consequences for the heroes. His presence brings weight to the story, and the mention of his very name causes an effect with the characters and the audience. We love seeing him because of that real threat, but we also hate him because he is such a threat to the characters we love. What do we see with these two examples? We see that they are a genuine threat to the heroes and those around them. We see they are willing to go the extra mile to get what they want, thus making them unpredictable in what they would do to achieve their goals. They are an extreme hurdle for the hero to conquer that requires great strength, will, and strategy on the hero's end to overcome. Failure would mean extinction, so failure is not an option. The risk in going toe-to-toe with these characters is high, but so is the reward. We as the audience see that and love it. We want the reward of justice being served to the villain and the hero winning in the end, but we hate these characters as well because of the things they take before we can get that satisfying conclusion. We hate them even more because they retain some of their humanity. They see the harm they bring and could stop, but don't, only saving that humanity for select people and occasions. As fun and hard to watch as some of these villains may be, they aren't the final form of villain in media. There's another type of villain that rivals even someone like Omni-Man, and that's those three words are the only words that can be used to talk about these types of villains. They are the worst of the worst. Where the likable villains are loved, these villains we hate are universally hated, and for good reason. They are self-indulgent, wicked, murderous, cruel, sadistic, and gleeful in their sadism. These are the kinds of villains that you want to reach through your screen and slap across the face as a baseline reaction. Starting off, I present to you, if you know who this is, you despise this man by the mere mention of his name. Not only does the thought of him fill you with anger, but it also fills you with sadness and despair at what he did to his daughter. Sho Tucker, a character in Full Metal Alchemist, experimented on his wife and fused her body with a dog to create a chimera, which in turn led to her death. Not only that, but he did the same thing later on with the new family pet and his daughter. His daughter. I cannot tell you how much I hate this man. He did this for fame. He did this for greed, for his pride. This man is such a monster that not only did he harm and mutilate his wife, but he did the same exact thing to his daughter and both his pets. I know I already stated this, but it fills me with so much anger I had to say it twice. Sho is an example of how far alchemy can be taken. He sets the stage for the world our heroes are in, and even though he was the monster of the episode, his cruel action leaves a lasting impression on the heroes and on the audience. Now, because the other effective villains were in pairs as examples, I give you another one. When I tell you every time his face came on the screen, my blood immediately started boiling. What can be said about his character? A lot. None of them good. He kills and tortures people for fun on a whim. He is controlling and bloodthirsty, a genuine sociopath and an extreme sadist. Everything he does is meant to harm others because he is entertained by it, and if he isn't entertained by it, that just means that person's life meant nothing to him in the first place. He cares about no one but himself and his own sick pleasure that is derived from the pain of those around him. We hate Joffrey not only for this, but because he causes so much pain and conflict with the characters we love. He is a constant roadblock, or worse, an active tragedy about to take place on our heroes. We want to get rid of him or avoid him at all costs. He is a real present danger to the characters we love most. These are effective villains because they lean into their villainy. They are not a villain by name. It is in their blood, their breath, the very fiber of their being. They have zero humanity in them, and there is no redeeming quality about them whatsoever. They are real and present dangers to not just the heroes of the story, but everyone they come across. Upsetting them or even catching their interest has horrifying consequences, and more often than not, they have the power to be untouchable for a period of time. A power usually obtained through fear or status, or both. These villains have a massive effect on the plot and are always actively trying to deal damage to every character you love in one way or another. There is no other character whose downfall you root for more than these types of characters. Except for... These types of villains are rare to find, but when they do show up, they leave a lasting impression. These are the kinds of villains that get us paranoid as the movie or show is playing. They make us look over our shoulder or question those we know because we see traces of the villain in everyday people. Not too sure what I'm talking about? Think a deprived human being who murdered and cannibalized people. That in and of itself is a horrifying thought, but what makes it even worse is that he was a psychiatrist who, with his position, was regarded as someone respectable in society. Not only that, after his capture, he is sought out by the FBI to garner information that would lead to the capture of another serial killer, meaning this man was considered such an asset to the government that they kept a monster alive knowing his crimes against humanity because he was a benefit to someone else's agenda. But the villains we fear are not only limited to characters like Hannibal Lecter. People so incredibly rich that ordinary life bores them, and they use the desperation of the poor and needy for deadly entertainment. And because they are so incredibly rich, they have pull in government. They can sweep their crimes under the rug, have it so that it never happened, leave a mile-long trail of death and destruction, and call it a Tuesday. They are the reason the game exists. We fear these types of characters because they feel too real. They are effective because they feel too possible. They have similar characteristics to people we know or people we have heard of. The actions they take are ones we have seen mirrored in real life, and therefore know in our subconscious as we watch these types of villains that there is a great possibility that these characters aren't just a figment of our imagination. They may be rough outlines of real life people. We fear them because there's a possibility we may run into one, or worse yet, a possibility we already know one. Overall, these types of villains are effective because they aren't entirely fiction. In conclusion, not all villains are created equal. And as we have seen, each effective type of villain has their place in the story and are used for different purposes. Switch any of these villains from the respective stories and try to put them in a different one, and suddenly you have a very different feel in the plot that may not work as intended. These villains fit their stories, work well within the confines of the plot because the writers knew how to handle them, knew what made them work and what didn't. Not only did the writers have a master understanding of how to write these characters, but the casting director knew who would be a benefit for the role. The actor represented their character impeccably. The director guided the necessary emotions out of the actors with clear intent, and the editor pieced together the best clips to express to us, the audience, on what kind of character this was. Creating an effective villain in film and television is a team effort, from start to finish. But if we have learned anything from this video, it's an effective villain, whether we love them or hate them, pulls real emotion from the audience, whose actions have consequences, good or bad, and their presence is relevant to the story taking place. I hope you found this video both entertaining and insightful. Next video, I'll be discussing what makes a mediocre villain and wrap up the deep dive into villainous characters. Until next time, I'll see you later.